I had a week's holiday coming for Canadian Thanksgiving, so I decided I would leave the flatlands for a while and spend a few days in the Rockies. So, naturally, I ran into construction, which led to a detour, which led to me winding up in the middle of nowhere. The shortcut my GPS gave me found me on an isolated 2-lane blacktop, and not a very well-maintained road at that. I hadn't seen a car. Okay, I hadn't seen a pickup truck. This is Western Canada. For almost an hour, and there were no houses to be seen anywhere, let alone a town. But I found one eventually, a town, or perhaps it found me. I thought it a good thing too at the time. I was hungry, thirsty, needed gas, and a washroom. The town itself didn't appear to have a name. At least I didn't see any signs proclaiming, "Welcome to whatever." It didn't even show up on the wretched GPS. First order of business? Gas. As in petrol. The gas station had a name I didn't recognize. It was self-serve. Really self-serve. There was literally no one around. No attached convenience store, and worst of all, no people. Who was I supposed to pay? And where the heck was everybody? I hadn't seen a soul since I'd arrived, although I did spot a few isolated individuals shambling down the far end of the main street. And then I noticed the diner. It was old-fashioned and looked pretty run down, but a bunch of pickup trucks were parked in front, so I figured I'd discovered the heart of the community, Coffee Row. Coffee Row. They'd tell me where I could pay for my gas. I drove over and parked beside a vintage, a rusty pickup, which to my astonishment was a Fargo. A Fargo? They stopped making them when my dad was a kid. So that was some old truck. But all the trucks were old. Not vintage. Old. And rusty. Must be a bunch of old guys, I told myself, as I went to the screen door and found it covered in flies. Flies. Hundreds of them. They looked like carrion flies, too. What kind of a diner? No way I was eating in a place like that. What was it with this town, anyway? It seemed totally deserted. A dead town. Dead. I was just backing away when I heard the scream from inside the diner. It was a woman, and I was through the screen door in an instant. It was the smell that hit me first. The whole place smelled of rotting meat and another, even more noxious, fetid smell. I have never smelled a dead body, a corpse, but this terrible odor was how I imagined the stink of a decomposing cadaver would smell. The stench was so bad, it stopped me in my tracks, literally. And all the time, the woman kept shrieking. A figure lurched from behind the counter, a woman in a waitress uniform. She was blonde. I think she was blonde. And I thought she was probably middle-aged. Until she got up close to me. Her face was a skull. A skull with a blonde wig and covered with patches of dark, putrefying flesh. This thing was croaking at me in a voice like the screeching of nails. And then I realized it was trying to say, "Coffee, hun? Coffee, hun?" She held an old-fashioned cup and saucer in one skeletal, claw-like hand, but it was shaking so bad the liquid was splashing all over and falling onto the dirty floor. But it wasn't coffee. It was red and had a heavy, coppery smell. It was blood! A thud came from the kitchen area, and the screaming stopped. It was a thud like the sound a meat cleaver makes when striking a carcass of beef. It was then I noticed the hand-printed signs above the counter. Scrambled brains with intestines, $3.99. Scrambled brains with flesh strips. Scrambled brains with kidneys. Scrambled brains with testicles. I stopped reading then, as I was too busy projectile vomiting. The men at the counter, the dead men at the counter, had all turned to stare with sightless eyes in my direction, and one of them suddenly squalled, "It's a live one!" They lurched to their feet with much cracking and snapping of bones, while the corpse waitress flung the mug of blood at me, splattering the nearby wall. I hit the screen door running and booked it to my car. Thank God I had a full tank of gas. The dead town had come back to life. No, not life. They were all dead. So it was an undead town. But now, from every side street, every building, every direction, they came shambling, staggering, and galumping after me. I heard a strange, agonized roaring, almost a screeching, and I realized it was coming from my pursuers as they attempted to scream. Their dead throats were only able to produce a dry death rattle. I managed to get behind the wheel before they could catch me, and I floored it out of there, but not before the mob swarmed the car and surrounded it, pounding on the glass with their bony claws. I slammed my foot on the accelerator anyway, not caring if I ran them over, and had the satisfaction of hearing snapping bones. I hit the highway and just drove like a maniac, until I saw the red flashing lights in my rear view mirror. 2 cops got out of the car, and I noticed they had their hands on their holsters, and that both of them were wearing mirrored sunglasses. I rolled down my window, and as I did so, I debated about whether or not I should tell them what I had just experienced. Would they believe me? Or would they think I was nuts? I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, but in the end, I decided to keep my big mouth shut as the cops ordered me out of the car. I complied. One cop walked towards me, while his partner went around by the other side of the vehicle. The one walking towards me said, in an angry voice, "How could you do such a thing?" I noticed he had drawn his service revolver, and it was now pointed at me. From behind me, I could hear the second cop say, "There's dents up front here, where he hit them." "Hands up!" the first cop barked. "Why are you arresting me?" I cried, which is when I felt the barrel of the other cop's gun pressing against the back of my neck. I raised my hands. I was placed in the back of the cruiser and, much to my astonishment, we headed back to the town I had just fled. I had no choice then, but I had to tell them about what I'd observed at the diner, and that the place was a ghost town of the undead. The cop in the back with me gave me a look of pure disgust. "It's a town of the dead, all right, and that includes the 4 you killed." "I killed?" "Family of 4, including 2 kids." "What?" I was stunned. "Hit and run. Now you're gonna pay." I sat in total silence, unable to process what was happening. But that wasn't the worst of it. As we drove back into the town, I could see it was no longer a village of the dead. Now the streets were packed with people, angry people, all screaming, and each one shaking their fist at me. "They want to lynch you," one of the cops sneered, "and frankly, I don't blame them." They stopped in front of the local cop shop, and we forced our way inside through a screeching mob that yelled, swore, and spit at me. I would have pulled my jacket over my head for protection, but my hands were cuffed behind my back. The interior of the station stank to high heaven. It smelled as bad as the interior of that foul-smelling diner. "What's that smell?" I said as the cops dragged me down the corridor to the cell area. "You'll find out," they both said, laughing, or grunting, in a most disagreeable manner. We reached the cells. And they were full of them, full of decomposing bodies, the undead, zombies, staggering, shambling, belching, roaring, with clawed, skeletal hands reaching out to me to tear me apart and devour my brains. I turned towards the cops, only to find 2 rotting cadavers in police uniforms with long, sharp butcher knives in their clawed hands. And then they sliced me and they diced me until the darkness took control. The moral of the story? It's fun carving a turkey at Thanksgiving, but not for the turkey, and especially not if the turkey is you. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. Till midnight. Cheers. P.S. The idea for this story came from a conversation I had with listener Video Game Zombie. If you liked the story, thank her. If you didn't, blame me. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the music was the classic Ghost Story by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod. Tally-ho!